science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
Malfunctioning salutations, Cognonauts, and welcome to another episode of Exofathom. I am Nick, and I am joined with my two lovely co-hosts as always. Mike, how you doing?
Oh, man. You know me.
Hanging
in there.
As always, hanging in there. And we have Ayla tonight. How are you, Ayla?
I'm doing just peachy. I've got a cup of tea, so I'm in heaven right now.
Fantastic. Yeah, and we are hoping that you're in heaven as well whenever you're listening to this. Actually, no, let me take that back. That sounds weird. We hope that you're having
I was like, where's my little harp?
Yeah, the implications of that are not good. I take it back. We hope that you're having a wonderful evening or whenever you're listening to us. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Tonight, we're going to be talking about maybe one of the last cryptids ever, Gremlins. And yeah, I wanted to get into this because I thought there was going to be a lot more than there actually was. So I'm a bit disappointed about the lack of gremlin lore, but it is a modern cryptid. So that might explain as to why we don't have as much mythology and folklore surrounding these impish critters. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of this conversation and get talking about the menace of the gremlins and how they were the scourge of the air in World War II, I wanted to ask my co-hosts, what vexes you? And maybe we can start off with Mike.
Ooh. I've worked really hard on not getting vexed by things, not getting annoyed, not getting angry by stuff. Because a lot of things used to make me feel annoyed, especially when I was younger in high school. Dumb people, one of them. Just red tape, bureaucracy type stuff. But now I don't know. I guess I vexed myself. That's about it.
All right, yeah. So you're making yourself impervious to gremlins, but being your own gremlin. So yep. I get it. All right, yeah, that makes sense. Ayla, what vexes you?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I think that's a hard one to answer, but I think just off the top of my head, what came up was those moments when you are vexed and then you do a good job unvexing yourself, trying to change the tone of the day or rebound, and then you immediately stub your toe or hit your knuckles on the wall or something. So it's that moment where you're trying to regroup and then just one more little thing goes wrong.
It's almost like you have a cohort of gremlins that are terrorizing you.
Yes, it's exactly like that. I would say. I think it is that. It's absolutely that.
And it would totally be within their nature to the moment you try to turn the ship around to sabotage you again. So.
Oh, yeah. They're also that little thing on the back of your neck that when you see a bug and then all of a sudden you feel like there's a bug on you, it's just the gremlin with that one hair just sort of teasing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I when I was thinking about this, I was like, yeah, there are probably things that vex me, but I think the one that comes to mind off of the top of the bat is cords. I feel like, and it's irrational and it makes me super irrationally angry. But anytime a cord gets tied up with something, anytime it gets jumbled up, I lose my freaking mind. I really do.
You really do, actually. I've seen it.
I hate it so much. I go almost crazy just because I can't get these damn cords apart from each other.
At first, I thought you meant musical cords. I was
yeah.
What are we getting at? Nope. Yeah, those things could be annoying. Yeah.
No, I mean actual electrical cords or stuff like that. They always tend up to, get knotted or they're tied up together. And no matter what I do, I just end up making the knot tighter or, worse. And yeah,
Yeah, the Gordian Knot, I think it is. It comes from mythology, where it's all tangled. It's impossible to untangle, so you have to like cut it in half. That's the only way to
Pretty
do it.
much.
And the modern retelling is like Christmas lights.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my
Unbundle
gosh.
those.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Christmas lights are easier sometimes for me than some of the chords I deal with.
It's because you're preparing yourself for it.
Well,
You're in
I've
the
had a
mindset.
vendetta against chords ever since I was born because my umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck. So ever since I was
deep.
born, chords have been trying to kill me.
Everything
Wow.
comes from childhood trauma.
It really does. It really does. Now,
Wait,
whenever
so
I see him,
this? What if I just hold this here?
It's fine because it's not
fine.
mine. But if I had to try to untangle that, I would be having a melty for sure.
a melty.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of the spirit of what I wanted to get at with you guys is just this spirit of malfunction. Like Mike, if you're talking about interpersonal malfunctions in communications, things that like could be easy, but they get complicated by ignorance or just vexatious people. And Ayla, just it is a good word. And the Ayla talking about sort of the inner turmoil that you feel when you're just trying to get a hold of your day. It's like that malfunction that just ends up driving you crazy.
Yeah. It's like you had like a million emails, nothing's going right, and then you like finished a bunch of projects, but then they all come back to you and they're not finished. So then you're like losing it, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna have a cup of tea. I'm gonna like take a minute. You meditate for 5 minutes, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna get some water, and then we're gonna just get back on it, and then you stub your toe or break your knee. I don't know.
The tea spills on you while it's hot.
Or the tea burns the crap out of you. Yeah. It's like under any circumstances I could tolerate that, but it's just that last little thing. Worse.
Absolutely, it is the worst. And sometimes it's better to externalize those events in order to make things a little bit better. But we'll get into that shortly.
Blame the gremlins.
Blame the gremlins. Yes,
I was going to say blame Mike, blame me.
or you can blame Mike as he has transformed himself into a gremlin.
I'll just text you in the middle of the day. Yeah. How dare you?
And it's like, I'm sorry.
You better be.
That gets to my next question for you guys. Before I give you a little bit about the story of the Gremlins, what do you think of the concept of malfunction? I guess maybe not there's a better way to put that. But what is malfunction?
Awful
in your eyes. Awful. All right. Expound upon that.
Malfunction. No, yeah. Well, malfunction is just system error. Something doesn't compute. The logic is broken. The logic is no longer here. It's just something's not working as it has been designed to work.
Quite literally a misfunction or a malfunction. Yeah, absolutely. Mike?
It's funny because now that brings up the notion of bugs. And maybe just because I've been programming for so long now, you find out very quickly that bugs are just part of the natural process. So these malfunctions are there for a reason, and they have, like, if you ever run into a programmer that says they never made a bug in their life, that person's a damn liar. They should be treated like a lemming. But as you get used to bugs and you realize it's all part of like that process, then the malfunctions in the day-to-day life, it stops feeling like weight on your shoulders that keeps getting added up until it breaks you, right? You're just become, I guess, zen with the whole thing. So malfunctions, I think, are great because it gives you an opportunity to look at what's going on, whatever it is, whether it be interpersonal, between a person and a computer, and adapt to the situation.
Interesting. Yeah. Malfunctions are a necessary part of the sort of evolution and learning process. And I like that you say that they're sort of omnipresent. I guess you could say that they permeate throughout all of existence. And we'll touch a little bit base on that too as we talk about the concept of chaos and that kind of stuff in which it relates to gremlins. And but before I do that, we should just get into the sort of rundown of what gremlins are. Actually, I will add one more question. What was your first experience with gremlins? Was it the movie?
Oh. I think it was the Simpsons, like a Simpsons episode. It's like a treehouse of horror. And there's a gremlin on the side of the bus with Bart. He's freaking out, and I know that that's a direct relation to a movie about a gremlin because then you
The
see
Twilight
it
Zone
like
episode.
the Twilight Zone. There it is. Yeah. So I think that was the first time I saw it, and then super adorable Gizmo entered my reality.
Yes, much more cuddly than the gremlins that were accounted for. Yeah. Mike, what about you?
What do they sing?
That is, they're like Furbies.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I'm trying to do a Chewbacca.
Good try.
I can't do it. I gotta stop.
That's all right.
I
Now we sound like Cardi B.
I just was gonna say, like, is Cardi B a gremlin? Like, was she?
Well, because I am a gremlin.
Mm-hmm.
I am a son of a gremlin. So my first gremlin was my mother.
Mm.
And that was my introduction.
There we go. I like it. Yes. Funny enough, the female gremlins are called, I believe, Fremlin. Fremlins.
I was gonna guess Gremlinas.
Gremlinas is good. Yeah.
That's better than what was it? Fremlins?
Sorry. They're called the wives of gremlins are called Fifinellas.
Ooh.
Fifinellas. And that was popularized by Roald Dahl, who kind of brought gremlins more into pop culture.
It's a really good insult.
Yeah, it is. Fifinella.
Yeah. Add a little effing before that.
Yeah. Well, actually, my first introduction to gremlins was it was a Bugs Bunny cartoon, and I'm glad that I have the page up because it was a 1943 Merry Melodies cartoon of Bugs Bunny, and it was called The Falling Hare.
How old are you? No, I'm just kidding.
I'm very old. And this is back when Looney Tunes were good, y'all. This is just it was a cartoon, Merry Melodies cartoon, so maybe like 10 minutes, 11 minutes, but it was about Bugs Bunny and a gremlin that was attacking an air base. And normally Bugs Bunny is the one that gives everybody the business, but what struck me about this particular cartoon is that even Bugs Bunny was being vexed by the gremlin, so much so that I think at the end the gremlins win. And Bugs Bunny, like, it just has them hitting him over and over again or something like that.
That's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also funny because Bugs Bunny characteristically has always been that type of trickster character, and he's sort of the vexer to everybody else. So when you see him being vexed by this little gremlin,
karma.
it's kind of a funny experience. But that was my first introductory. Of course. The tie-in to aviation is where they really come from. And so, like Ayla had brought up just a minute ago, there's something on the wing. The very famous Twilight Zone episode with William Shatner, who saw a gremlin man on the wing of a plane. But okay, let me get into this. Gremlins really come from the word germain, which means to vex. It's an old English word. But they're mischievous creatures invented at the beginning of the 20th century to originally explain malfunctions in aircraft and later in other machinery and processes that their operators. Depictions of these creatures varied widely. Stories about them and references to them as the causes of especially inexplicable technical and mental problems of pilots were especially popular in and after World War II. The first use or the use of the term in the sense of a mischievous creature was brought by the Royal Air Force and it was slang among the British pilots stationed in Malta, the Middle East, and India in the 1920s, with the earliest recorded print use of them being in a poem in the journal Aeroplane in Malta in 1929. And so concepts of gremlins were popularized during World War II among the airmen of the UK's Royal Air Force, in particular the men of high altitude photographic reconnaissance units, or PRUs. And the flight crews blamed gremlins for otherwise inexplicable accidents which sometimes occurred during their flights. Gremlins were also thought at one point to have enemy sympathies, but investigations revealed that enemy aircraft had similar and equally inexplicable mechanical problems. As such, gremlins were portrayed as equal opportunity tricksters, taking no sides in conflict and acting out their mischief from their own self-interests. In reality, the gremlins were a form of buck passing, or deflecting blame. So there's a quote here from John Hazen, says that the gremlin has been looked on as a new phenomenon, a product of the machine age, the age of air. And some experts believe that this form of passing the buck was important to the morale of the pilots, where historian Marlon Bresci states, gremlins, while imaginary, played a very important role in the airmen of the Royal Air Force. Gremlin tales helped build morale amongst pilots, which in turn helped them repel the Luftwaffe invasion of during the Battle of Britain in 1940. They go on to say that the war may have actually had a very different outcome if the RAF pilots had lost their morale and allowed Germany's plans for an invasion to develop. So in a way, it could be argued that gremlins, troublesome as they were, ultimately helped the Allies win the war, because morale among the RAF pilots would have suffered if they started to point the finger and blame each other. And so it was far better to blame a fantastical scapegoat. And that's really the origin of gremlins. There isn't a whole lot more information because it's a phenomenon that really happened maybe just pre-World War II. I think the earliest they said is 1929, but really with the advent and more regular use of the airplane. Now, the airplane, Marx Brothers invented the airplane in 1903, and I read this article. It was really interesting. By 1909, the military owned the airplane. So the Wright brothers built it in 1903, and then they get approached by the military, and they're like, how can we make this into a weapon? And it took them until 1909, and that's when the military had their first airplane, which is kind of just an interesting aside about the history of aeronautics. But I thought it was, what's that?
Those fun facts.
Fun facts. Yeah. Did you know? Did you know? Yeah. As soon as the Wright brothers made the airplane, the government's like, we want that.
Yeah.
we need some of those. Yeah. But yeah, so it became this phenomenon that sparked during the early days of air travel and especially combat in the air. And I wanted to bring up that passage and that information because while the information I just read totally demystifies the concept of gremlins, I do think that there's something interesting there anyways, and that's the concept that they talk about of morale and scapegoating. And so I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think of that? Do you think that is... I find it difficult because I know that lie and truth and the concept of truth can be so utterly nuanced that it almost feels pedantic to have a conversation about it. But I wonder if there are noble lies, because this to me kind of almost seems like a noble scapegoat or lie in the face of very dire circumstances that could have been, part of the winning edge that the British needed, even though what the truth likely is that there were several malfunctions, and pilots being, a new technology probably made a lot of mistakes. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you on that in the sense that like I don't know, like the pursuit of perfectionism is something that can be really debilitating. And so I think that to be able to let yourself off the hook and move on, especially in times where it's not so much about getting things perfect, it's about like don't get dead. Like that's an incredible strain on a nervous system and a person's psyche, and then you add like constant failure or fear of it with dire consequences. I don't think that's something that like people can sustain. So having a heroic little gremlin, scapegoat is kind of nice.
Yeah, and it also explains again the human error that would be involved in aeronautics. I mean, especially during World War II, aeronautics is maybe 3 decades old. I mean, so this is still a very young technology, all things considered. And you have a lot of people that would probably be making mistakes, and perhaps it is better to blame gremlins on those mistakes instead of your pilot that you need to go do another strafing run.
Yeah, I could see that.
There's a version of this that exists today, and yeah, it is important for morale and just people living their lives, right? Like, have you ever read stories about how some bank gets hacked and loses a bunch of banking information, right? All your banking information's out there now, all your info, and they blame it on a glitch.
Right.
The modern day version of the World War II gremlin is, at least in the software world, is the glitch. Whenever you read glitch, somebody messed up somewhere in their code.
Right.
Right?
You're like, it doesn't actually exist, guys.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, those glitches, we fix them. If it's a glitch, how do you fix a glitch? What are you talking about? You're not making any sense anymore. But do you really want to put blame on that one programmer who probably is just another decent human being living out their daily life, trying to do the best work that they can? Do you really want to blame them for having a logical inconsistency somewhere that somebody else exploited? Right? Whether that be through the mechanisms of social engineering or actual computer engineering. No, you don't. So we're just going to blame it on the glitch, handle the situation internally. Whatever happens to that programmer, if they can even pin it down on that programmer, happens to them, that's fine. So there's still stuff like that exists today. And it's super important. And I imagine it's even more important in the military. And also, did you call the Luftwaffe the Luftwaffle?
I think I did.
That's hilarious. That's amazing.
That's how it's spelled. And I'm not German, so there you go. Yeah. I know I get what you mean. I think there is a utility to it too. And that's where I bring up the concept of truth, because obviously the truth would be that these airmen are making fatal errors and destroying their ships, or something's going on. But it's more advantageous, again, to keep that scapegoat external and not bring the sort of conflict, especially within the military, within your ranks. You don't want that conflict to be brewing inside of your ranks, especially when there's a war going on. So
yeah, because think about it from the opposite end, right? So let's say we go the 100% transparent and honest route. Then you got to blame somebody. You got to figure out who did it. Then you got to handle the discipline of that. Then you got to replace that person. In the military context, it's not like I can grab Joe Schmo off the street and like, hey, you fix airplanes now. Here's a book. Right. Good luck. You can't do that. So you have to find a way to handle the situation and keep your ranks in high morale and in order.
And you also had to think about, too, especially during World War II, the nationalization of materials and the nationalization of labor that happened. So you actually probably weren't getting, no disrespect to all of the civilians that helped with the war effort, but I don't know if you were getting as uniform of a product as you might normally in other circumstances. So you had people riveting airplanes, you had people making the engines, and it was sort of like a civilian effort to help, to help. I don't know how much standardization was happening or how much quality control was happening with that too. I'm sure there was some, but again, you got to probably think that some tired riveter may have missed a spot, and then your plane falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and even more reason to just sort of be like, we can't cry over spilt milk. We don't have time. We gotta just keep going. And I think there's definitely merit to that sort of approach in certain situations. And
There's this idea of pushing, right? About the military, but when I ran into it was in Counter-Strike, where Counter-Strike's a game that is a first-person shooter. There's objective-based and team-based 5v5, but the map design is all around choke points, right? And if you're playing competitively and you don't push through that choke point, you're done. You're dead. So just if we're gonna stop and try to find somebody to blame, that tired riveter who was working 12-hour days for the last 6 months for war efforts, nobody gets through the choke point then.
Right.
But if you have these gremlins, guess what? We cleared the choke point. We got into our area of conflict or area of engagement, and you're able to take care of the thing. And that's what matters more than trying to figure out who did what.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
And Mike does bring up just to drive
Go ahead,
home
Anne,
Mike's
please.
point. I really like the awareness of it takes a lot of effort to track that kind of stuff down. And that's a really interesting thing. The way you spend your time on stuff. If there's an error that happens, is it worth 3 times the amount of time and resources figuring out, what went wrong versus moving on, which has pros and cons too. Because earlier I liked, Mike, you were saying that those breaks in a system can be useful because it's telling you okay, well, this is where I have to do some repair work. And so it gets to be tricky too, because it's to get to that point, sometimes it requires an investment of figuring it out. So.
Oh yeah, but the question you have to ask yourself is when it happens and you realize the error, is right now the time to investigate the error?
Right.
Or is it fixed?
Gremlins.
Yeah. And then we can reapproach it at a later time when we can all be honest with each other. All right, we know it's not gremlins, but all right, let's figure out what happened now. We actually, now it's 1946. We have some time to talk about this stuff. Right?
That would be so stressful though. You're just coasting for a couple years, yeah, gremlins. And then it's okay, we're gonna go look back now, guys. And you're like, what? No. What? Yeah.
No, what are you talking about? I don't remember. I don't recall.
You see this mass exodus of gremlins packing their luggage, and certain humans being please no, just leave.
Good luck, humans. We're out of here.
And to me, I always picture gremlins with feet that's kind of like the Grinch, so they're pointy, long, furry toes. They're just sliding out.
Well, beauty is pain, so that makes I don't know where it's going with that.
Well, now that you mention it, there are it's funny because there are many different accountings of what gremlins actually look like, but there is a bit of a consensus, and the consensus I could find is that they look like Mothman.
Creepy.
Are you saying Mothman was a gremlin, or are you saying gremlins?
I mean, maybe from accounts that I read, and I have some accounts and testimonials for you guys, so I'll get into those in a second. But from some of the accounts that I read, the description was a dark character, about 3 to 4 feet tall, long fingers, glowing red eyes. That's pretty much it. That's about as close to any descriptions that are uniform that you can get. Others have accounted them as more fair-looking creatures. I think that's where you might get into the concept of fairies or even the Foo Fighters. I think the Foo Fighters will be a different episode, and fairies will definitely be a different episode because that fairy lore is so thick. But you could justifiably say that some of these entities that were in the sky could have been what the Germans called kobolds, or you might call goblins. There are some similarities, but gremlins really are categorized by the machinery and the malfunctioning of machinery. Like that's their MO. So there's really no analogs in the mythology for that. But from according to a couple of accounts that I read, it did kind of remind me of Mothman a little bit. Glowing red eyes, very like almost like a shadow body, very long fingers, and they used to like to dance on the wings of these airplanes.
Why the dancing?
It kind of brings me back to sort of the Germanic fairy lore, the way they're very playful and sort of impish. That like the dancing seems to be something almost like we're mocking you. And as they dance, they start to strip parts of the plane away, and that, you know, like they're very destructive creatures.
Sounds
They're
like
having
it.
a good old time.
That's exactly it. They are having a party. Their party is the destruction. They love it. There's nothing better to them. So, but yeah, maybe Mothman was a gremlin. Maybe. I mean, the bridge collapse would be a mechanical failure. So
True, but was he dancing?
maybe, we don't know.
So, do you like when like rock stars like party it up hard and they start throwing stuff out their windows and things? Are they being possessed by gremlins?
Maybe.
What's going on?
When they trash their hotel room, yeah,
And
absolutely.
they're still partying, like when it ends up like in Fear and Loathing or something.
Yes,
The
Could've
gremlins
signed
are
that.
there.
the gremlins are there. That's yeah. If you ever wanted to elicit gremlins, well, interesting. In some of my studies, there was a belief that bravado was what attracted them, and you have to think that, you know, like if you're a pilot, you might be a little bit of a hot shot. Maybe you're a little arrogant in your flying. The main thrust and the sort of propaganda, like the intro card to our episode today, is part of that propaganda campaign to warn people about the dangers of gremlins and to not display too much bravado or arrogance, because that's what attracts them.
Yeah, you can't have all these mavericks in the sky.
That's
There's
right.
only one.
There's only one maverick. Yes.
I still need to watch the latest one.
Oh,
But
right.
it's funny, every time you say gremlins, this is such a sidebar that has nothing to do with this conversation exactly, but I
Mhm.
just hear Christopher Walken's voice, like the gremlins did it. Like, I don't know, but you know, like, do you hear his voice and then you just hear him like blaming gremlins for something?
Was he in the movie or something?
I don't think so. No, it's
This
just,
is
it's just,
all right.
yeah, it's just like a thing in my head.
She just wants him to hear to
Right.
Christopher Walken to say gremlins. I think that's it.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's fair.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's just- like I said, it has nothing to do with this conversation. It's just it's in my mind, and now it's in your mind. So you're
Mhm.
welcome.
Ah, thanks for the mind virus. I didn't
Uh-huh.
read it. But I'll take
You're
it.
welcome.
But no, like it makes sense though in a military structure. If this is a military base scripted, where you don't want your soldiers to, you want them to follow orders, right?
Mhm.
The old classic command chain structure and all of that. And pilots, the Air Force, all of that, very arrogant. They're smart kids that get to fly millions of. How much money does a jet cost? A fighter jet cost? How much money did
Billions now. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the P-51 Mustang or something, like World War II era. Like how much did that
yeah.
cost? Like
Probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, which would have equated to millions. Yeah.
So they have a built-up sense of bravado about them, but you want them to have that in order to complete their objective. But at the same time, you don't want it to become so much where they fly into the mouth of the dragon, where they go on a suicide mission because their confidence betrays them in that situation.
Right.
So it makes sense why bravado would invite the gremlins. And then on the other side is how do I want to say this? People simultaneously love confident people and hate them. So there might be an element of trying to prevent sabotage, where if I was a mechanic on your plane and
don't be a jackass to the mechanic.
you banged my girl or something,
Right.
And now I'm going to sabotage your plane because screw you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you can keep the bravado in check, if you keep that arrogance all in check, then that situation never comes up. So to me, it seems a little logical why bravado would bring in these gremlins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see it. It makes sense in a military sort of setting as well. One more fun fact. The military bought the first airplane from the Wright brothers for $30,000.
Oh, wow.
There you
That's
go. That was their first military plane, cost $30,000. Yeah.
It seems like a lot of money in the 19.
Oh yeah, it's tons of money. It was I think it was 1909, something like that. Yeah.
How much do you think like an airplane costs, like a bomber, or not even that? Like if you buy a blueprint of a bomber, or even like a Navy vessel or like a submarine or something, how much do you think that would cost?
Oh, like a submarine?
Yeah.
Jeez, those are probably off the books. I don't even think they have a budget for those. I think that's all black budget stuff.
Wonder if they take a firm.
Yeah. I've been thinking like the how we've been giving money to different countries for different educational purposes. I feel like those are the excuses for the black books we actually use to build military stuff.
Maybe. We would never know. That's all I can say. Yeah. Okay, so where were we about that? Did the little thing. Oh, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of testimony. So some of the more famous testimonials about gremlins from these pilots. Let me start with LW and the B-17 plane incident. So this was in World War II, and it was a pilot, LW, who claimed that while he was flying a mission over European skies, he suddenly saw a beastly, menacing creature looking at him from outside the plane. Shortly after, another similar creature perched on the plane's nose and stared at him. According to his account, both creatures were 3 to 4 feet tall and had many teeth and red glowing eyes. He also says that their hands were disproportionately long. Shortly after, the disoriented LW came back to his senses and started flying the B-17 erratically in an effort to dump the two creatures off the plane, which he managed to successfully do. However, he never got to see what became of the creatures as they let go of the plane. Let's see. Another one is a pilot, Royal Air Force in 1923. He crashes his plane into the waters of England coast after little creatures interfered with his flight mid-air. However, in his interactions with the purported gremlins did not start on the plane. According to the pilot, the gremlins first appeared to him the previous evening after they popped out of a beer bottle. I might be seeing what happened here. He later suspected that they followed him onto the plane, where they started messing around with the controls of the plane and navigation system. In his account, the pilot claimed that the creatures became too much of a nuisance that he had to dump the plane off the coast of England. It means he had to eject himself from the plane. Because the gremlins were too bad, or he just had a really terrible hangover. Because if you're seeing gremlins pop out of your beer bottle, you might be in a little bit too deep.
Yeah, there's something going on there.
Yeah, gremlins are popping out of the beer bottles. You have too much bravado.
That's right. Yes,
you gotta cool your engines.
Cool your jets.
Yes.
Well, and okay, so like, and forgive me if you mentioned this and I'm sort of like just reinforcing it now, but when it comes to like the history of aviation and things like that, would this have been one of the first, like, had flying been commercialized at this point, or was it pretty rare to have been on a flight such that
Yeah,
like
so
the
this is
air is
back.
still
Sorry, go ahead.
well, I guess the question is was the air system area still very much new territory for the people that were up there?
Perfect question. And yeah, I would say that it was probably a pretty novel space as well. But yeah, this one is 1923. You have to think that the military bought their first plane in 1909. Probably took a little bit of while to get to this sort of space, because you look at the first Kitty Hawk plane and it's just wood and paper wings, really. And then you get into these mechanicalized airplanes that are actually made of metal and aluminum and have engines in them. And that's 1923. So that's a pretty quick jump from 1903, the first launch of Kitty Hawk. 20 years later, we have mechanical engines in these things, and they're made of metal. And they're still flying the way the balsa wood paper ones do. So yeah, it would be still pretty novel for people to be in the air, because probably very few people got to experience being in the air.
Yeah. And I think, so that kind of puts a lot of this in context, because for so long we would have looked at the natural world as scary and a source of monsters. We're in our little camps and there's the woods, but at night, it's full of dark and terrors. And so now it's add to the air, and the mind can play tricks on you if you're in uncertain territory, or you're not really sure what to expect, or there haven't been a lot of people before you to give you a heads up. It could have been something as easy as seeing another plane in your periphery, and you're just seeing the red lights and the shadow or something, or who knows what kinds of I don't know, visual tricks things were happening up there. But I don't know. It's just interesting to kind of think about it as these are some of the first tales of the exploration of the skies or something.
Yeah, and go ahead, sir.
No, you're all good. Even too, I'm sure the mechanics and science of actual aviation and all that found out was not well understood. So maybe flew too close to a storm. Either got caught in some sort of turbulence, something that those planes at that time couldn't control. Obviously, I don't know if they would have something like wake turbulence now, like jet wash and stuff like that. But it could have been even you could have been hungover. But I feel like if you're hungover and it's because you weren't operating well enough, you weren't going to admit that a gremlin crawled out of your beer bottle. That if you're gonna start hiding,
true, right?
Yeah, if you're hiding the story, then why admit to even have a beer bottle? So it almost seems like it wasn't pilot error, but something that he couldn't explain. So instead went with the Gremlins thing, because the science just wasn't there yet. We just didn't understand all the different forces at play when you're flying an airplane. And if you've ever been in a Cessna, Ayla, I know you've been skydiving. I'm sure that thing rattles around like a.
Oh yeah, yeah. You definitely, yeah. And that's a really good point, because that's a situation where you're not. It's an unusual flight. So, for example, I've been on commercial flights a lot. You go up, you go down, you get some peanuts, take a nap, you get off the plane. But the first time, it was a rickety little plane, and I don't know what to expect, and I know I have to jump out of it, and the fear is there. Yeah, you all of a sudden you're noticing everything, every little sound. You're looking at the atmospheric meter. You're looking at the light between the two panels that are held together by one little screw. You notice everything. So I think that definitely has to play with people's heads, because if you're like a pilot and you're driving and you don't know if you're going to get shot out of the air or make a mistake, or I don't know. I also well, I was just going to make a funny joke, but I also wonder if so we have all these unidentified aerial phenomenon that are happening. Okay. So like if that is indicative of like something sharing our like an interdimensional sharing of the world that we inhabit or something, then it'd be pretty funny if like they stayed in the skies. And so then once humans start flying, all these like whatever they are like, oh shit. And, like they didn't have time to adjust and hide properly. And so like it was some sort of like maybe an ancient animal or like I don't know. I'm getting really out there and stupid, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm just
Like,
playing
why-
with ideas.
Why don't these weird humans know that you don't travel on this route? You
Yeah.
travel on that route. Now you got in my way. Don't you know I pop up here?
Right,
It's been the
right.
standard for 4 millenniums.
Well,
Mhm.
Ayla, you touched on something that I wanted to point out too. I think what happens is that cryptids live in sort of the unexplored areas, and so it's a natural progress that once we started putting ourselves in the sky, we might interact or perceive cryptids in the sky as well. Because you think about it, we were land explorers first. We were exploring the forests. We were afraid of wolves and and beasts. Then we started
Mhm.
exploring the oceans, and we were afraid of sea serpents and krakens and giant, I don't know, giant sea animals. Sirens, all of that stuff. And then we go into the air, and now we're seeing these sprites and gremlins and St. Elmo's Fire and Foo Fighters. And so, yeah, I think that there is something to that, which I'll open up a little bit later. I just wanted to share one final with you guys. Charles Lindbergh, who is probably one of the more famous aviators in the early era, that had his own experience with some entities in the sky, although his experience was a positive one. He claims that, so he did the longest flight in 1927 from New York to Paris. And according to Lindbergh, he had an encounter with grim-looking mystical creatures who appeared to him occasionally during his flight. These transparent creatures were friendly and would often have conversations with the aviator, despite other accounts depicting them as mischievous and full of mayhem. Lindbergh disclosed that the beings appeared to more spiritual than human, and in his conversations with them, they imparted mystic knowledge. Lindbergh, however, failed to disclose what his this mystic knowledge was, probably fearing ridicule. However, critics have discredited this story as mere hallucination. So there you have a very famous aviator who also accounts of a tale meeting these cryptid creatures in the air. Now, that's a very long flight. If you're tired, you could have hallucinations very easily. Being in a sort of like a kind of like a, I don't know, the sky is very uniform and very monotonous, so it'd be easy to start imagining things in a space like that. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting that there's plenty of accounting of sort of anomalous creatures in these uncharted territories.
Hey man, it pays to be friends with the Gremlins.
Does.
Regardless if the blue is the sky or the sea, it's good, pays off.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that it's just a part of who we are as well. And sometimes I think, not in Ayla wanted to get out there. I think this is my out there idea, is that perhaps these creatures are real, and that in the high stress of navigating novel spaces, we fill those novel spaces with potential for entities or fears or whatever. And maybe the more you explore that novel space, the less those entities exist. But at least at the beginning, when you're at the threshold of exploring a new space, it is full of potential. It could be full of anything. Imagine being the first person that flew from, New York to Paris, and you're like, I'm going to be in the air for 17 hours. Like anything could happen. I could meet God,
Loving chaos, loving the unknown.
Yeah. I think it's like that fine line of being on that threshold of the veil, or the precipice of that dimension of potentiality, of chaos. Yeah. Um, which I think is kind of cool, because as humans, when we enter the novel space, we fill it up with monsters. And then as we explore the space, it becomes more refined and tamed and dignified. But I also do feel like once you get to a threshold within that, where you've explored all of the space, you almost reinitiate the potentiality by learning more about the space that you're in. So you could think of like the oceans. And yeah, we know a lot about the oceans now. We know more about the life in the oceans. But perhaps if we pull a James Cameron and go to the bottom of the Marianas Trench, when we find that door, it opens up a whole new bevy of potentiality.
Sure, and that is the definition of the hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
One that's able to go through those unknowns and do their best to handle the monsters that lie either beyond the door, or at the bottom of the trench, or at the top of the sky, or in space, or as below so above, that sort of thing, or as above so below, however you want to say it, it's the same thing. It's that sort of framework of who is willing to push the boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like just the and that's why I kind of said, like, the last cryptid with the gremlins, this really should be more of a eulogy, because it's the demystification of the airspace and aeronautics that killed the gremlin. It's always that way. It's the demystification and sort of the understanding of the space that kills the monsters within it. And like I say, I lament tongue in cheek. Obviously, I don't want gremlins to be dismantling airplanes, but there is something romantic about the concept of gremlins, and there is something that's a little bit, I don't know. There's something
heartbreaking.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a little heartbreaking when we demystify something so far that it just becomes mundane.
Yeah, once I got into computer science and programming, and like my specialization within an academic sense, intelligent systems, this ranges anything from agent AI to automation to information gathering, you call it information retrieval is the proper name for it, a bunch of different systems. But once you start to demystify all this, that glitch that had that such a romantic thing. Oh no, it's nobody's fault. There was just some sort of glitch that happened here.
Right.
That's gone, and you get a little sad. It's like, no, it's somebody's fuck up.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's what actually happened. But the rest of the world doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a moment of heartbreak of the demystification of domains of unknown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And that's where I kind of, this is almost to eulogize the gremlin as one of the last cryptids, because until we get up into space. Then I think we might open up the new potentiality right there. It's like we will demystify everything on this earth, but the moment we break out of that firmament, it's all open up again.
Dude, there's a beautiful movie called It. I think it's called It, the Monster from Outer Space.
Oh, okay.
And it's very similar to another movie title, but it all takes place on a single spaceship going from Mars to Earth.
Mm.
And it's so claustrophobic. It's so good at horror that it captivated me. This movie ends up becoming the inspiration for Alien.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so it has its like modern ties. And we're starting now to, in our mind, have these machinations of gremlins of space. Mm-hmm. And what I'm really excited to see is, like, once we start exploring it, the monsters recreate while exploring it. Because I think I would take sci-fi in a completely... Now I'm derailing the conversation.
No, not at all, because that's where the conversation was going to end up anyways. Yeah.
Okay, so like space gremlins. Space gremlins are going to be dope.
Yes,
yeah.
I agree.
Well,
I agree.
And, you're making me want to invite a listener, or maybe I'll do this if I have enough time, but it would be fun to look at all of the people on record who said they saw gremlins and track them down or their kids or grandkids, and try to find out if there's more to that story. Were they obsessed with it, leading one to believe that maybe they did see something that was of interest? Or did they recant? Or what's the trend there? Because it would be kind of interesting to see maybe like a series of stories where there is something and it sounds crazy only because we haven't been able to witness it enough times to lend the proper verbiage to something. You know what I mean? Because like it could have been a discovery. It could have been like, some different level of a condor that was like attaching to the planes and then went extinct. We don't know. But it would be kind of cool to just try to get that down. And then as we forge ahead, make more comparisons. Because you're right, Nick. There's something of like a heartbreak when you think about the natural world shifting from something dangerous and powerful and scary to something that we feel like we've controlled or something.
Predictable, mundane.
Predictable, mundane. Yeah.
Ayla, are you some sort of documentarian or journalist? Because this is starting to sound like a journalist documentarian job.
Well, I have a lot of ideas. I get like I think I'm good about rabbit holes. I know how to dig a really deep rabbit hole. And if I find it intriguing, then I'm sure somebody else might find it intriguing. But
I would call you Alice, but I don't know who invented Wonderland, so I cannot call you Alice.
There you go.
Oh, right. There it is.
Well, speaking of this sort of how our tendency as humans to take the chaos and make it mundane, I did want to bring up the concept of chaos because while I wasn't able to find mythological comparisons to the modern gremlin, aside from Fae and kobolds, which again deserve their own episode because that history is very rich. What I did think of is the concept of the agent of chaos. And like Mike brought up at the beginning of this, there isn't always an element of malfunction and chaos that exists. So perhaps we don't need to be sad that the gremlins are gone because they can always, like we said, manifest elsewhere. Because to me, they are a representation of that chaos. They are the agent of that chaos. Thoughts?
Oh, that was the end of the idea?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yeah.
No, that's the way I kind of conceptualize it. Although agent of chaos isn't really like even a thing. It's kind of just a colloquial saying that we use.
The tone and cadence of your speech.
I know. I dropped off too easily.
And then it was just like a clip.
No, that's
and
it.
I was like, what? Are we done here? Like, so.
Yeah.
No, chaos is very important. Chaos is, I'll freely admit, is something that I enjoy being in. And it might be due to the chaotic nature of my childhood, the houses I grew up in, the lack of houses I grew up in, all of that. There's always, when you don't know where you're going to sleep, chaos is literally in your face. You're always in the unknown. And as a programmer, maybe this is wrong. As a computer scientist, your job is to, even as a programmer too, because chaos is relative, is to pull order out of chaos, right? So we're always constantly living in chaotic environments. And once you get to that point, it becomes like these gremlin things, even the monsters, the mythical monsters, they almost become your allies, or you become one in a weird sort of way. Mm-hmm. And being an agent of chaos, it's not always like an active nihilist like the Joker. Joker's a pop culture icon at this point, right? But as an active nihilist, and even in Heath Ledger's Joker says, I'm an agent of chaos. It doesn't always have to bring negative destruction. Destruction is an act of creation, right? Mm-hmm. There are certain plants that, in order for them to grow, there has to be some sort of fire. There has to be some sort of destruction that happens.
Yep.
So being an agent of chaos is just part of the natural process of No, maybe that's it. It's just part of the natural process of being. I don't know how to say it.
Progression.
Yeah.
Progression too, because it goes back to your concept of the malfunction and how they're necessary to proceed in any sort of study or focus or whatever. So it would seem to me that yes, chaos rears her head whenever we get too hubristic, whenever we get too arrogant, when we get too much bravado. That's when the chaos hits us the hardest. Because when we're prepared for the chaos, it's not as devastating. But it's when we think that we have everything worked out that the chaos interjects itself, and then that's just flattening.
Proper chaos is, from a man's perspective, is the woman that got away. Is the girl that got away. She's the one that came in, broke your heart, and just left.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're lucky enough, you might compare the woman that you married to her.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of notion, right? Like, but it was necessary because if you didn't have your heart broken, you would have never met the woman you would have married, sort of thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it becomes part of the natural progression of evolution of yourself and all of existence.
Yeah, I honestly sometimes I feel like chaos has such a negative connotation to it that it really shouldn't. It's almost like the hitting of the potentiality button. Like you have this, just you run the number generator, and it just goes on to the most random number you can think of. Because
it's terrifying. I'm sorry.
It is terrifying. Yeah, I guess it's unanticipated, right? It's the thing you're not prepared for. But it's perennially, it's eternally the thing you're not prepared for, which then goes back to your conversation about embracing it and sort of finding the value in it, because it will always be there.
Yeah. And once humans are great at adaptation. I am a human. I suspect both of you are humans.
Debatable.
Yeah, all right. I forgot Nick's a robot and Ayla, you're a Lumerian, right?
Of all the things you could have. I'm sorry, that makes me really laugh. I'm honored, but that's hilarious. Also, I don't even know what a Lumerian is. Like, people keep talking about them as if there's like established lore. My mind can't hold on to it.
Well,
But
welcome
anyway.
to the chaos. But humans are great at adaptation. So in the beginning, it's very scary when you're introduced to a new environment. For example, taking an airplane flight. The first time you take a commercial airplane flight, I mean, I was...
it's scary. It's
shaking
scary.
and sweating. The girl I was dating at the time was feeding me drinks just so that I could remain calm. It was, But the more you adapt to that environment, the more you stay in that environment, the more comfortable you become, which is adaptation.
Right.
And the same thing goes for chaos. If you stick yourself in the middle of chaos, not only can you learn to be okay with it, or learn to be comfortable with it, you can learn to thrive in it.
Mm-hmm.
But chaos is that ultimate place where people don't want to go.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, because of the there's a negative connotation because it's unpredictability, but it's also unlimited potential. It's it has a dualistic purpose. It's not just one thing or the other. It is both things. It is the fire that burns down the forest, but it's also the seeds that grow anew. So yeah.
So poetic, Nick. I love it.
Oh, it's true.
I
like chaos.
Write a book, Nick.
There we go. Yeah. But I wanted to just bring up, since we are talking about chaos, this is my last little thing. I just want to bring up the concept of Murphy's Law, because we're already sort of talking about it, which is anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And I think that's just an apt sort of mantra to understand that, again, you can prepare, you can plan, but if you get a little bit too cocksure of your ideas, then the Gremlins might come for you. Or, this also reminds me a little bit of Nemesis when we're having our luck and fortune conversation back in the day, how she would come for retribution on the arrogant. So there's always that energy.
Yeah. The funny thing that the first time I came across Murphy's Law, my mom had a engraved metal plaque of it. I shit you not. When you walked in the front door,
Yeah.
it was the first thing that looked at you.
Wow.
Was an engraved metal plaque of Murphy's Law.
Hey man, I mean that's a realist take. That's a very real take on life.
It's like, oh man, and that's always been stuck in my head. It's just that note, like, can go wrong, it will go wrong. Build contingency plans, figure it out, you'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the things that need to go wrong are to go wrong for a reason. And perhaps if it weren't for the Gremlins, we wouldn't be able to have commercial flights that go across the world now. That harbor, ferry people all across the world, and you get to go see loved ones in other countries. Like, yeah, there's a lot of good that comes from those malfunctions that the early pilots had.
Bugs have a reason.
Absolutely.
They exist for logical progression, human growth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whether it be tighter safety standards, not safer, tighter standards. Tighter standards. Yeah. But they all exist for a reason, to build upon this process, this collaborative effort of human existence, to explore things that as a species we've never done before. So we got to figure it out, and it all helps to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, Ayla, do you have anything that you wanted to add there?
Oh gosh,
Good.
I had like 20 things I could have thrown in there, but I mean, I just, it's fun listening to you guys chit chat about this, because yeah, it's an interesting topic, that chaos. Nick and I were watching this documentary about how they put together the first image of a black hole. And it was really cool to witness the methodology that us humans use to say, like, okay, we can say this is a thing, just so, like, for example, they had this like all this data, and they had a rough idea of how that would translate into an image. But what they ended up doing was having like several teams of scientists work together to recreate the image, then compare the images that they all got, and then kind of like assess the margin of error. And if all the images were off, then there was a lot more to reconsider. They had to go back to the drawing board. And it was just pretty cool when there was like, it was like 1, 1, 1, like it was the same across all four of them, with a really comfortable degree of comfort there, and like Nick's saying, if you get too arrogant and you think, okay, well, we can just use this methodology for every black hole, I think that's where the danger and the gremlins arise, because maybe there's a black hole out there that doesn't behave the same way or is affected by other variables. And I think it's, yeah, I mean, gremlins get a bad rap, but, they're a means to an end, like many things.
Yeah, you're right. I've been thinking about the anomalous. I'm thinking about not black holes, but we can call them gremlins. How do I want to argue this? How do I want to say this?
Well, the black hole was certainly Hawking's gremlin. It was interesting to see the way that one answer ended up contradicting another school of thought and discipline, and it bothered him.
Yeah, to the end, probably. Same like Einstein's spooky, the quantum stuff, right? Vexation, gremlins. How to capture lightning in a bottle. Been thinking about this thing recently. In the last couple of years.
It's a good musical.
I've never seen the musical, really.
Well, musical festival, Lightning in a Bottle.
Oh, that's right. I never watched.
I haven't been. I just know, like, I've seen videos. It looks fun.
Nice. But I think there's a way that you can this alchemical process. By alchemical, I don't mean actually turning lead into gold. I'm talking about turning a motion A into a motion B, or motion A into something you can run off of, some sort of energy, some sort of fuel. But I think if you can understand the things that vexate you, you can start to capture them and then put them through an alchemical. That's the word. An alchemical. I'm dyslexic. I apologize. Alchemical process that will allow it to become fuel for the future, for any endeavor that you want to do. So you take these gremlins, and I don't mean like you liquidate them. You don't like kill them, but you let them work for you.
Liquidate them.
Yeah.
You turn them into
Right.
shoemaker elves.
Yeah, or
That's what you do.
Goby.
That's what
Yeah,
I mean.
sure.
Like the shoemaker elf helps the cobbler. Yeah.
No, go for it. Finish your idea.
No, I was just saying, like, the alchemical process would be that you take the gremlin, the thing that vexes you, and then you transmute it into the shoemaker elf, the thing that works for you. The shoemaker elf in Germanic comes into the cobbler's house and makes all his shoes for him every night.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, I really like that. I was thinking of something similar, but with like Santa Claus. So you take all your gremlins,
Or the elves. Yeah.
yeah, you turn them into elves, and they make all the toys for the kids, right?
Right. Mhm.
And then that's the alchemical process that you ideally would strive for, is to see the things that in modern language terms that quote unquote trigger you. It can be words, it can be images, it can be sounds, or whatever. And then you do the internal process to turn that into fuel.
Yeah.
And work off of that fuel.
Make your gremlins work for you. In 5 easy steps.
No. It's
Gremlin-
got gremlins. Here's why
Gremlin
it's a good
doctors
thing.
don't want you to know this secret.
Oh, is it from the South Park? Step 1, find gremlins. Step 2, capture gremlins.
Yes.
Step 3, question
Profit.
mark. Step 4, profit.
Yes. Step 3, question mark. Step 4, profit. Yeah. Totally.
I'm still working on it. Hopefully one day I'll be able to elaborate the process.
This is sound business advice.
Yeah, in a very simple way. But right now, I know the feels of it all.
I just can't wait to see the logo work. You know, it's like one of those Pog banger coins that's like it's holographic.
Got gremlins.
No, it's a holographic. So on the one end, it's this like nasty, mean-looking gremlin, and then when you rotate it, it turns into the shoemaker elf, like all nice and
Right.
helpful.
I only want like the internal layer, like you know how $100 bills have pictures of like the president, like as a thing in the bill. I just I want one. No, I lost it. Never mind. I'll get back to it.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
I lost it.
It's all right.
Where did it go? There has to be some
Where
black
does it ever
hole
go?
that has
Those
all of our
damn-
ideas.
They took them.
Those
from your brain.
damn gremlins. They just took everything from me.
They crawled out of your beer can and stole them from your brain.
In 3 years, we're going to reassess this. But for right now, yeah, gremlins.
Gremlins for sure.
Oh, great, dude. That's what I need, is another psychological review.
All right, guys. Well, you have anything else on gremlins that you wanted to bring up? Anything before
No,
we wrap
I'm
this
just
up?
going to bring it back to black holes. I just got to be real careful not to keep
Hold on, I got
talking
it.
about space.
I got it. I got
You
it.
got it, you got it.
I got the thing. So the watermark, or the thing in between the bills, is psychological warfare. So on one side, it's a gremlin. On the other side, it's the shoe elf. And then in
Oh,
the middle, it's psychological warfare, written in Latin, because that's how you make all the coins.
I got a sound drop. So yeah. And anytime you guys drop something, I'll give you a little air horn.
can we hear that again, please?
Yeah.
I dig it. And
I also have this
appropriate.
whenever we get a little bit too out there.
Yes. Oh my god.
Yep.
Now I'm gonna purposely go out there.
Right.
So
Exactly.
yeah, let's talk those black holes because
No, black hole talk. We already have an episode. Go check it out.
Yeah, go check it out.
Go check it out.
Always make a part 2.
We can always have a part 2. Absolutely. But anything else on this one, you guys? Or
Gremlins. Yeah. Have you seen any current Gremlin movies or lore that might be coming down the pike 2026?
honestly, I think that Mike had it right. We have to explore new territory to bring the Gremlins back. And I
Mhm.
think that you might, like this is a good question. I think Mike elucidated it with the concept of a glitch or a bug, but I could see where Gremlins might start to invade the digital space.
So we have to separate these two
Mm.
ideas. A bug has an endpoint, like a bug. You can report a bug to a developer, the developer that developed said bug.
Right.
And this is outside of the scope of what's called Heisenbugs. Heisenbugs are what happen when you create a bug while trying to fix a bug. So
It's called a Heisenbug of humanity.
You accidentally create a bug while testing the behavior of fixing a bug, and you don't know what to do. You get lost a little bit. It happens. It happens to every developer at least
Is there
twice in their life, maybe 3 or 4 times. They're much rarer than normal bugs because usually you can fix your logic. I'm sorry, ask your question.
Is there a name that like if you're the developer and you create a bug and then you find out that you created the bug, are you then named like the bug creator or the queen of the bug? Or
No, I wish.
I'm just thinking
No.
because Heisenbug,
Yeah.
that's just, I don't know, there could be like, oh dang, I pulled a blah blah blah, and
Yeah, no,
and
it's
like a
just
thing.
because bugs.
No,
are
you
so
can't
common.
try for the air horn, Ayla. It just has to happen. Okay.
What? I'm not trying for the air horn. No, I was actually just
You wanna be
trying
queen
to
of the
get the
storm or something?
lingo. No, I just
So
wanted to get to the lingo.
So the lingo is like bugs are common with every developer. That's why if you're the person that makes the bug, you don't get a special title. If you make the most bugs, there might be like a fantasy football last place trophy thing happening, but typically programmers don't do that, or developers don't do that, teams don't do that, because software developers tend to be intellectually egotistical, so they don't even want to admit that they have any bugs. So if you give somebody
Ripe
a
for
trophy for
gremlins.
having a bug, then they're going to go commit suicide. They're going to go, that's it, their life is over. They don't. So bugs get handled in a way where everybody creates something's fine. Now, if you created a piece of software that was like an AI, a sentient AI that created software with a bunch of bugs, then you can argue that you're the queen of the swarm, which is a
Hey.
StarCraft reference.
Okay,
But-
I'll take that. I'll take it.
Yeah, but typically not. But we have to define the difference between a bug and a glitch. A glitch is supposed to be something that's like, as an old supervisor would say, there's a ghost in the machine. There's something here that's just haunting our systems. The glitch is supposed to be something unexplainable, just like the ghost in the machine, which is the same thing as Gremlins.
Right.
But now we have to define what a ghost in a machine.
No, we don't. All right. We're
I'm
done.
like, let's
Good
go
night.
down that rabbit hole. Let's
Nope.
get it.
No.
Oh man, if there's
I'm
some
wrapping
sort
this
of
one up.
like AI that became sentient and just started like wrecking computers, that might actually be a really good worm bug, or not worm bug, a worm to build like with like a root where like it's not a human who's hacking you and destroying your systems. It's an AI that's just thrashing your whole
Heisenbugs.
environment.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ripping your rivets out.
Yep. No, not ripping your rivets out, just untwisting them slightly.
Right. Unscrewing them just enough.
Yep.
Just enough to cause a catastrophe. Yeah.
Yes. That would be a great weapon, actually. Now the
Good
government's going
story.
to come talk to us. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Or
Exactly.
showrunners. I think these are some good stories, people. We haven't had a Gremlin movie, like a serious horror
We've
film.
had 3. What are
I
you
said
talking
serious
about?
horror film.
Okay, well, go
Uh,
watch them and tell me they're not being serious.
Yo, the peak of Kathleen Kennedy, I'm pretty sure was Gremlins, right? She made the second one, or she like produced the second one or some shit.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, go back to Gremlins. What are you doing in the car? Get out of here. Get out
Decent.
of Star Wars. Gremlins.
Bring Gizmo back. Okay.
Do it.
Well, I
have
think
faith in you.
I think we're done for tonight. Yeah. Thank you guys for the conversation. Thank you to Mike and thank you to Ayla, as always, my wonderful co-hosts. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. I see Keelan watching. Thanks, Keelan. We appreciate you always, man.
Keelan.
Thank you so much for checking us out. And thank you guys for tuning in. Please be sure to give us a thumbs up and a subscription to our YouTube page. It would really help us out a lot. If you want to check out what we do with our friends and a network of podcasts, you can go check out Facebook at Thinkering Talks. There are a myriad of podcasts you can go check out there. You got Keelan on Tuesdays with If Numbers Could Talk on at 8 p.m. And then we have Tuesdays and Thursdays, Dijon on Twitch at Strawberries and Coffee. Wednesdays and Sundays is Screen Time Continuum. And we got Fridays, of course, Exofathom. You can check all of those out at Thinkering Talks on Facebook, but they all each have their own YouTube page and Spotify and Rumble and all of that good stuff. So if you're interested in those shows, go check them out. They got their pages. Follow them, like them, all that good stuff. We just really appreciate you guys out there. I think that's it for us tonight, guys. So again, thank you. And until next time, Cogmonauts, you stay out there and we'll catch you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Don't fear the gremlin.
And take it easy.
And take it easy.
Take
I
it
want to say
easy.
baby don't fear the gremlin, but I didn't know baby was going to be too intimate for the audience.
Baby,
Yeah.
baby, baby.
Baby don't fear the reaper.